first financial Taft and KMK. Remember that today is usually how it goes is 45 minutes of presentation with 15 minutes of questions. I know Bill and Josie are hoping for some participation today. So if you please could turn on your camera if you are able, that would be fantastic. Or if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat function or just unmute yourself. Other than that, as always, we will have a survey for you to fill out at the end. So if you could please fill that out, we appreciate any and all feedback. And now I'm going to turn it over to Bill and Josie from Flywheel. Take it on over, guys.
What is going on, you guys? Thank you so much for having us. I'm really excited to be here with Bill. We are the Flywheel team. We're going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship's role in driving social impact, how Flywheel does that in the Cincinnati ecosystem, talk about some ideas, questions, any thoughts that you guys might have. But I really want you guys to get as much as you can out of this. So I want to make it a conversation. I want you guys to ask questions and all of that good stuff. So I'm Josie. I'm Flywheel's program manager. We'll talk a little bit more about what Flywheel does specifically in a little bit. But Bill, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Bill Tucker, and I am executive director of Flywheel, and this is my second act. My first act was in the business world. So, Bianca, I don't see that your camera is on. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh, we're calling people out now.
I'm sorry. Let me move to a different room real quick. My family's always being noisy. I'm always trying to figure out my camera because it never seems to quite correlate the lighting, but okay. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I told you a little bit about myself. Tell me a little bit about you.
Okay, so I am a senior in high school and I like to play volleyball. I love hanging out with my family, skiing, ice skating, all the winter sports. Love that.
Awesome.
I feel like I'm really creative. I love, getting into things that don't make me feel as comfortable like this because it really challenges me to just step up to the plate and do something new.
Great. Thanks. It's great to know the audience. So thank you very much for that. Yes. And so I'm going to reiterate what what Abby said, and turn on your cameras and let me see your faces. Go ahead. So anyway, back to you, Josie.
Yes, we love putting people in the hot seat. Okay, so I've been in a couple of the Monday sessions with Mike. So I've seen a little bit of what you guys are learning about pitching. I looked at the schedule of other sessions you've had. It sounds like you've had presentations from some really cool entrepreneurs that we know. So before we get into our session, I just want to hear from you guys. What are some of the more memorable or exciting or insightful things that you've learned so far? Like what have you picked up along the way? Anyone? You can put it in the chat. You can just unmute yourself.
Diana, what have you learned so far? Oh, Diana. Oh, it's Alina. Very good. Ilana.
We got Ilyana. It's all about the problems. Yes. Yes. So true. It's all about solving problems, right? If nobody wants your solution, you're not solving a problem. How to build a fishbone diagram. That's going to be very helpful.
I think I was probably 40 years old before I knew how to do a fishbone. So awesome on that.
Yes. Gamification. I was trying to get you to come back to the store. Yes. A dopamine cycle in-game purchases. We love it. Okay, cool. Good stuff. Okay, now let's look forward a little bit. So today, the title of today's session is How Entrepreneurs Drive Social Good, right? So this concept is something that is increasingly popular with your age cohort, right? People have higher expectations for the social responsibility of business, people doing good, making impact, doing things with purpose, right? There's a lot of different ways you can approach that. So what is something that you guys want to learn today? What questions do you have? Like, sort of what interests you about this topic? Nothing? What is social entrepreneurship? I'm so glad you asked, Zand.
So I'm just dying, I'm really dying to hear from one of you, just to say, what would you like to learn about this notion of social impact or entrepreneurship for good? So somebody turn on their camera and give me the answer quick. Dorian, yay. Give it to me.
Uh, so to me, I think social entrepreneurship is really just how to basically another form of networking, how to sell yourself, how to present yourself correctly um, to others. It's basically like a elevator pitch, I would say.
So it's really interesting that you answer that way, because we get that all the time, right? Like, oh, social entrepreneurship, that's all about like the human side of entrepreneurs and like the networking and the interactions, which is definitely a big part of it. It's a human-centered field. But what we're going to be talking about is the way that entrepreneurial ventures can make impact on like challenging social or environmental issues, right? You guys have learned so much about the philosophy of entrepreneurship as problem solving, right? Imagining how might we improve something or how might we solve a pain point. So the same thing can be applied to these like big, hairy, intractable problems of society, like climate change or, you know, racial bias or things like that. We'll talk about some examples of how you can do that. But just off the top of your heads, I want to hear about when you think about like an impactful company, right? Whether it's a startup or a big company or, you know, a global organization, what are some companies or organizations that you think of when you think of like impact? Like, you know, companies that are doing social good or companies that are impactful in some way. Yes, Patagonia, that's a great one.
Yeah.
Here's a question I had. So to what degree does, giving back to the community also help the company? Because you see like companies that give back a lot also get a lot, not only from exposure, but also more awareness to their brand and the cause that they are helping.
Yes, that is a great question. So we'll actually talk about that in a slide or two, and about the sort of the spectrum of social good when it comes to business, right? The sort of what's in it for me factor there. So we'll get to that in just a second. Yes, human rights organization. That's a good one. Ocean Hero, Ecosia. I've never heard of that. That's a good one to write down. Okay, cool. So you guys can think of, a couple, right, examples of things. Instagram, TikTok, interesting. So it's more on the social media side. Let's look at some examples. So somebody mentioned Patagonia. That's a really popular one. So people tend to think of social good in the business sphere in sort of one of two ways, typically, right? On the left here, you see the sort of traditional stereotypical like charity angle, right? Organizations that are specifically designed for that social purpose. They're either feeding hungry people, housing homeless people, conserving the environment, all that kind of stuff. And that is their sole purpose. And they're not always, directly, selling a product or service. They're not outwardly commercial in a way that a lot of businesses are. On the flip side, on this other side, Patagonia was mentioned, a lot of other popular examples. Tom's Shoes, I think, was one of the most popular like social purpose companies for a really long time. You could actually do a whole case study on Tom's as a not so great example of social impact business. It could be about who they employ, right? It could be a company like Dave's Killer Bread. They employ people who are recently released from incarceration, so it creates job opportunities for them. Ben & Jerry's makes a lot of progressive political statements around their products. Patagonia is all about sustainability. But these companies are doing things that are, maybe they're in line with their values, maybe they're making some sort of influential impact, but their business does not depend on that, right? It's sort of ancillary to what they're doing. Dave's Killer Bread could make bread and bagels without hiring second chance employees. Ben & Jerry's could make ice cream without making statements about Black Lives Matter and climate change, right? Patagonia could make hiking gear without sourcing recyclable materials, but they do that. And in part, I'm sorry, what was your name? I can't see on here. Jaden.
I can look it up for you. Is it, what's the question?
The guy in the black polo with the red in his crown.
Oh, is that me? Jaden?
Yes, Jaden. Okay, so to your point, there's a pretty big difference in the motivation of these two different types of organizations and the way that they operate. So on the one side, on like the nonprofit philanthropic charity side, one of the most challenging things about it is that they don't usually have a business model that funds itself, right? They're relying on either grants from private foundations, from the government, from organizations that fund charitable ventures. They rely on donations, charity dollars, right? So they're not, oh, is the PowerPoint messed up on your guys' screen? Oh,
Yeah, it does look a little weird.
is it better now?
Yes.
I think that you're getting conflict probably because of that. So you may need to just minimize that.
Okay, so if you're a nonprofit or a not-for-profit organization, you are allowed to make money and generate revenue, right? You can even have, units of business where you're doing things on a fee-for-service basis, but those profits are not allowed to leave the organization. So really, it's just a tax status. It can be really challenging because you are relying on outside sources of funding, right? You don't have a product or service that's generating consistent revenue for you. But sometimes in certain service sectors, it's the only model that really makes sense. When you're doing a lot of like direct service stuff for really disadvantaged populations, sometimes there really is no, direct revenue generating model that makes sense for that. And you're just relying on, public charity. And that's okay. Sometimes that's the model that makes sense. But there are other ways that we're going to talk about in a little bit. On the flip side, or like the other end of the spectrum, you get this corporate social responsibility concept, right? So that's your Patagonias, your Toms, your Dave's Killer Bread. These companies are typically allocating part of their own budget and saying, okay, we're going to do this project, or we're going to have this, part of our company that does this. For everyone who buys a pair of shoes, we're giving one away. We are dedicating, X amount of new hires to this population, things like that. But it's not core to the central, purpose of the business, right? It's just sort of a nice tack on. And to Jaden's point, more often than not, I hate to say it, this is a PR move. You hear a lot about CSR washing or green washing or good washing or things like that, where it's companies that will take on some sort of social responsibility initiative. You can usually, the sort of litmus test for this is usually whether it goes beyond their branding, right? I think something that gets a lot of attention in June is the idea of companies supporting Pride Month and changing their logos to, some rainbow version, and people saying, well, is that actually making some sort of impact, or are you just branding yourself to get more sales? So it's always important to consider, how deep does it really go in that company's mission? But to that point, these corporate social responsibility initiatives can still be really impactful, right? Big companies like Coca-Cola and Nike and the ones that have global influence on that scale, when they put on some sort of marketing campaign towards a certain, social, political, environmental issue, that can make a significant impact because they have that sphere of influence. So scale really matters when it comes to that sort of stuff. Now that was really meant to be an overview of like the traditional landscape of, business for good. I guess that's sort of the typical conception of like, okay, if I want to go out and make an impact on the world, what can I do? Where Flywheel works is in a sort of middle ground, right? The idea of social entrepreneurship or social ventures. So that's why I have this to show somewhere in between, a purely commercial for-profit business and a purely charitable nonprofit organization is the realm of social impact businesses. So that's where Flywheel works. These are companies that have social impact or environmental impact at the core of their mission, but they use entrepreneurial principles and business and like revenue generating business models to achieve their impact. So quick definition of a social venture. A lot of it is sort of a, it when you see it, right? It's not a centralized, standardized definition, but generally, like you guys have learned so far, social venture, like any other business, is built to solve a problem, right? They see something like, racial disparities in hiring, or, pollution in the ocean, or a lack of educational resources for a certain group, and they want to go out and solve it. The difference between something like a social venture and something like P&G donating a lot of laundry detergent is that P&G donating a lot of laundry detergent is not the core of its Tide business unit, right? A social venture is specifically designed to solve that problem. The impact is inextricable from the operation of the business. It uses a business model to generate revenue. So whether it's like a combined revenue model for a nonprofit that says, we'll have some grants, we'll have some donations, and we'll do some fee for service work where we, provide our services or products for a fee, or a fully commercialized, retail business that sells jewelry for a social impact and, is sourced from people from underrepresented backgrounds who are using sustainable materials or things like that. But it has some way of generating revenue so that it can be financially sustainable on its own. And it's independent of its tax status, right? It can be a for-profit or a nonprofit company. That's typically the last thing that we look at when trying to work with a social venture. It's more about what is the purpose, what is it trying to achieve, and what is the most advantageous structure that's going to get you there. So before I get into some real examples, I want to pause and see, does anybody have any questions, thoughts, concerns?
Question about some of the companies that you had presented on the last page.
Yep.
I saw someone, this made me think about it too. I saw someone say in the chat also, how do you discern like who is actually doing good and just talking out? Because like that hiking company, they talked out against BP about using petroleum in an unsafe manner, but they use petroleum almost all their hiking gear, if not all of it, in a very unsafe manner. And Tom's makes $2 shoes and sells them for $60, gives another $2 shoe to someone else. How do you discern against like that versus someone on the left where they're kind of giving more and more driven towards actually helping and not a publicity stunt?
So I tell you what, Jaden, I'm going to take a stab at that. One of the things that's really important is when we think about social impact, to not get focused on what I'll call purity. If you have a pure mission, you may have great impact, but if you don't have scale, if you don't do enough of it, it's not going to be impactful enough. So when you think about somebody like Tom's Shoes, think about the millions of people in this world who have been impacted by that. And what they're doing is they're leveraging the power of the marketplace. They're leveraging you as a consumer of shoes to get more impact around the world. So what we really focus in are social ventures. And by the way, we use the word social enterprise and social venture interchangeably. We focus on those organizations that really can make scalable, significant impact. That's where we focus. That may be an indirect way of asking your question, but I think the central notion is that we don't look for purity in anything. What we look for is good intentions that have scalable impact.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Pretty good. And a lot of times you can look to outcomes, right? Like look downstream and see look downstream and see what you can measure. Are people more aware of, oil companies' predatory mining policies because of Patagonia's actions and therefore using less fossil fuels? Great, then they have made an impact. But a lot of times that's why we really encourage the companies that go through our accelerator to identify from an early stage, how will you measure the impact of what you're doing, right? How will you know that you're actually achieving what you set out to do?
And by the way, just as a little bit of a side note, for those of you who've talked to Zan and Abby and know a little bit about the environment down at Union Hall, it's a great place to meet other entrepreneurs. And one of the things that all entrepreneurs seem to have a supply of are really cool t-shirts.
T-shirts.
Josie's going to talk about how this is one of Flywheel's programs.
Yes.
But what I want to say is for Jaden and Bianca and Dorian and those who will subsequently turn on their cameras and ask a question, you get a free t-shirt.
Wow.
So let's go.
The stakes are up, you guys.
So I just wanted to reiterate, so like pretty much what you're saying is like the awareness that you're creating is the main cause that a lot of these companies are going for, is to shed light on some of these issues.
I think show some of those examples will probably help a ton.
Yeah, For the larger corporate social responsibility initiatives, yes, it typically tends to be around awareness because that's something that's really easy for them to hand to their marketing department and say, hey, let's communicate about this.
Okay, effectively also have the goals of the business, create a profit, and then also have that goal of helping your cause.
Right. So yes, and then we're going to get into some examples of companies that are what's a charitable way to describe them? They're impact focused, like to their core, right? They're designed with missions of making impact, so that's specifically what they're focused on. So it'd be really interesting to look at those and contrast with something like, a Tom's. Before we get into that, I do want to reiterate that social entrepreneurs are still entrepreneurs, just like you've learned about in all your other sessions. They still have the same challenges, the same, range of opportunities, the same sort of general characteristics as any other entrepreneur, which is to say that the three biggest things they need are customers, talent, and capital when getting off the ground, right? You might have heard Eric Weissman talk about that in our first session with Mike. So just to poll the audience, I'm not fancy like Zaina with my actual polls, but which one of these do you guys think is the most important for an entrepreneur? Do they need customers to buy their product or service? Do they need talent to build their team? Or do they need capital to fund the beginning of their business? Customers. Ooh, a lot of love for customers. Wow. I like where your guys' heads are at. What if they don't have the financial resources to produce enough of their product to meet customer demand? Talent, capital. Yeah, what if they really need a salesperson? Nobody on their team knows how to do sales. All of a sudden they have a bunch of opportunities.
And what if nobody is interested in buying their product?
Right.
There
we go. Ellie figured out the trick question. Yes. So as you probably guessed by the very rhetorical way that I asked that, these all work in tandem to help entrepreneurs get off the ground, right? You need capital to fund the operation of your business. You need a strong team, a talented team behind you. You need customers who are going to give you traction in the market. So these are the things that we really focus on when we're taking companies through our accelerator programs. We're like, look, help us understand what you need in the way of customer acquisition. Help us understand in what ways you need to strengthen your team, and tell us what you need in terms of capital, and we will support you on the way there. So, like I said, Flywheel works in the area of social enterprise. We support entrepreneurs. My favorite thing about this work is that we meet people who are just so belligerently crazy passionate about their area of social impact. They are ready to change the world. They are so hyper focused on, climate change or racial equality or education or whatever it may be. And like, we just get the privilege of sitting down and being like, let's help you harness all this energy and build a business around it. So we like to say that we give them the tools, the guidance, and connections to help them make their businesses run more efficiently and become scalable. Have you guys heard about the idea of scale or scalability and what that means for a startup yet? Yes, okay. Somebody just give me a super quick and dirty definition of what it means if a business is scalable.
It means it can pretty much grow quickly among a large amount of consumers quickly.
Yes, totally, right. I think a common term that they use in venture capital is like hockey stick, the idea that something will go like, whoo, in growth, but yes, something that can be replicated at a large scale in the market. And that is something that social entrepreneurs are not always super focused on because they're usually really community minded, which is awesome and really makes them passionate about what they're doing. But a lot of the times we work them through the realization that, if you turn this into something scalable that can be replicated in other communities, you'll be so much more investable and then be able to make more impact. So that's kind of where we come in and help them try to increase their impact through a more financially sustainable business model. So I know that in your pitch competition thing that you guys are doing, you were given 3 topics to explore. And those are DEI, sustainability, and education. I was super psyched when I saw that because DEI and sustainability are 2 areas in which we specifically have programs for entrepreneurs. And then education is something that we have had a lot of startups spanning all of our programs focusing on. So I'm really excited to run through a couple examples of ventures that are working in these areas and how they're going to make their impact. But I also really want this to be a conversation, right? I assume that at least some of you have got to be interested in these impact areas and potentially looking to make a difference. So I want to hear what you guys are thinking too. So first, in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Very big problem, very hairy, very complicated and broad spanning in its like factors, right? So what are some like specific problems or challenges related to diversity, equity, and inclusion that you think need to be solved? Like if you could go out and change something about, related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, what would it be? What are some problems that we have?
Oh, I don't know. We could speak. I was just going to say education. For me,
yeah, access to
that's
education.
a big portion. Yeah.
Bianca, job discrimination. Yes. Yes. I think those are 2 of the most, I think most urgently talked about. Lack of diversity in school staff. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Dorian, did you have more to say along those lines? I think Josie was starting to expand on education. Dorian, do you want to pop back on?
Oh, I was just going to say education. For me, I've been able to see like both sides of the education, as far as like poor education and then good education, and it really is a impact. Because when I was going to school in a younger, like learning about when I was in like the poor education, terrible education, like a lot of the funds is really spent for lunch instead of resources to help educate the students, get them proper things to really educate and learn about what's going on in the world, or even like clubs or activities. Whereas when I transferred and went to another school, there was different clubs and things to where we had access and to more different resources, and we were able to be a lot more knowledgeable than the last school. So yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for that example. That just really shows how interrelated all these things are, right? Like, a lot of overlapping factors in all these impact areas. So, as you guys can tell, the problems and the challenges of equity and diversity and inclusion can get really specific, right? There are ways that you can approach things like education, hiring, access to food, right? I saw food insecurity as an issue. So I want to tell you guys, oh God, I'm going backwards. I need to be going forwards. So I want to tell you guys about 2 companies that just went through our Elevate Equity Accelerator program that are working in this area. They're targeting similar issues, but in really different ways with different business models. So this is Sherry Sims on the left. She's the founder of Black Career Women's Network. And then on the right is Nicole Armstrong, founded Queen City Certified. So let's talk about some of the similarities and differences here. So when Sherry founded Black Career Women's Network, it's because she experienced and saw in her peers a really significant gap in not only like the job opportunities, the hiring and promotion for Black women in corporate America, but also a distinct lack of mentorship and other support resources, right? They aren't getting into mentorship groups. They don't see other people like them in the workplace who are willing to help them get to where they are. So she created a tech-enabled network of Black career women who will mentor each other, participate in career advancement programming, things like that. She has a background in HR. She's been a HR professional for about 20 years prior to launching Black Career Women's Network. So she leveraged that experience to move into a B2B business model, where now she's going to, for a fee for employers, create recruiting, hiring, and placement services for Black women, right? So companies who are saying we're trying to improve our DEI strategy we're looking for diverse hires. They can look to Sherry and on a fee-for-service basis say, hey, we want talented, diverse recruits. So that was Sherry's solution to this issue of lack of support, mentorship, and opportunities for Black women in the workplace. Another example, Nicole, Queen City certified, she ran into research that showed that, single day or, short-term one-off diversity trainings for corporations are generally not effective. They don't show long-term outcomes. They don't lead to policy changes. She was getting really frustrated with that. It's like, why are these companies spending so much every year on consultants and educational programs and things to improve their diversity if they're not actually implementing the actions, right? So she created an educational program called Queen City Certified that small and mid-sized businesses can participate in. And they receive certification as a result. So they get rewarded, they're incentivized to participate. They get the stamp of approval that says they are working on building an equitable and inclusive workplace. So that's a benefit for them, right? They get to use that as a marketing tool when they're hiring. They also individually take data from that company and create custom action plans for them. So they say, okay, how could we improve your family leave policy? How could we improve your pay scales? How could we improve different things about the workplace that could make it more inclusive and equitable? And they make those specific recommendations to the company so that it's manageable and easy for them to implement. They get recertified based on achieving those goals and are able to continue using that as a marketing tool. So there's a unique benefit advantage to the company, and then Queen City Certified gets revenue from them participating. So again, taking two very different approaches. One of them is more going directly to the employees, the women, and saying, let's build a network and help advance each other through mentorship and hiring and job placement. The other is going to the employer and saying, hey, here's how you can create lasting data-informed workplace policies to improve your workplace. Two totally different approaches that are actually going after a similar long-term impact, right? Any questions on those? Oh. Yes, good point by Bill. Both Black Women's Network and Queen City Certified have impact on diversity, equity, inclusion. Neither of them take grants, donations, or any other charitable funding. They both receive revenue for the work that they do. All right, any questions on DEI or these two companies? No? All right, let's talk about sustainability. So yes, Sustainable Cincy. So this is a program that we actually partner with Centrifuge and HCDC to put on in the fall. We'd say companies focused on environmental sustainability. Yes, and these are our fabulous t-shirts that you'll win for your participation. So again, much like DEI, sustainability is a very broad and complex area, right? A lot of different challenges, a lot of different moving parts, a lot of different stakeholder groups, right? Government, companies, individuals, a lot of different angles you can go at it. So what are some things about sustainability that you guys are particularly interested in? Like, what's most important to you, or what do you think are the biggest, most challenging problems? Come on, a lot of plastic in the oceans, you guys. Yes, reducing your carbon footprint, plastic pollution. Those are two huge ones. Waste management, energy needs. Yes, the amount of, we had a company in our cohort this past fall called Last Mile Food Rescue. Very cool. They enable sort of like Uber for food waste, where they have volunteers get called to go pick up food and deliver it to people in need. More than 40% of the food that's produced in the United States is just straight up wasted. That is crazy. Okay, good examples from everybody. So, like I said, we ran this program last fall. We had a great variety of companies doing all sorts of different things, everything ranging from sustainable urban agriculture to recycling to transportation, all kinds of different things. So I want to talk about two examples, Swarm and Bee the Keeper. They are both bee branded. Only Brandon himself actually works with bees. Swarm is a little more of a cutesy metaphor, but they called themselves the Bee Buddies when they were in the accelerator. It's really cute. Swarm is actually from Australia. They're based in Melbourne, which is really cool. Brandon is from Cincinnati. So doing two very different things in very different business models. Swarm is an app. So it's a totally tech-enabled, tech-based solution where users can calculate their carbon footprint based on the products they buy, the appliances they use, the amount they drive, all those different things. So you can plug it in, you know, a recipe that you made today, and then I did a load of laundry, and then I drove to and from work, and it tells you what your carbon footprint is. It's gamified so that it lets you set goals to reduce your carbon footprint, make suggestions for things like, you know, appliances or products that have lower carbon footprint, or recommending, you know, walking to work when the weather's nice, things like that. So it helps people understand and manage their own carbon footprint. And there's a community function because y'all know humans are inherently both cooperative and competitive. So it lets you see your other friends' sustainability scores and carbon footprints too. Encourage people, like they said they can foresee having whole like schools or like office workplaces have competitions to see who can reduce their carbon footprint the most, things like that. So that's one company that went through our accelerator last year. One solution to a problem, right? The difficulty of understanding your own impact and managing it. On the other hand, we have Brandon, who runs Be the Keeper, and he recognized that pollinator decline, which, you know, save the bee, bee populations are being decimated right now by pollution. And they are really important in like the food and agricultural ecosystem, right? Without bees and butterflies and pollinators, we won't have a natural ecosystem to support food production. But unfortunately, sometimes that in and of itself is not enough to motivate mass action or a purchase, right? So Brandon realized that companies and like municipal organizations and people with homes are spending a lot more money, effort, and resources than they need to on maintaining their lawns, right? Like industrial parks and office buildings that have huge patches of grass that nobody ever uses or looks at, they're paying to have it watered and mowed, and it's doing nothing for the environment. So what Brandon created is a business model that does pollinator-friendly landscaping. They will redo your landscape with native plants, flowers and trees and things that attract butterflies and bees. So it helps support the environment by giving a home to pollinators. And for the businesses, the value proposition is that it reduces landscaping costs and reduces the need for maintenance because native plants are easier to maintain. So those are two examples of companies in sustainability. Any questions on that? Thoughts on other sustainability ventures? Things that you guys are interested in sustainable innovation? We're doing this program in the fall, so we're gearing up for that right now. Any thoughts? Going once? Going twice? All right, I want to make sure we have time for questions. So last, we have education. We have a few companies that have gone through our programs in the education space. One that I actually did not include in this presentation is called POSSIP. They have a software program that lets parents and schools communicate via like text message surveys. And their founder was actually the first Black woman in the state of Tennessee to raise over $1 million in venture capital. So that is a point of pride for Flywheel that they've been really successful. But some other examples that I want to talk about. Education, like these other ones, is a space that has a lot of very complex factors at play and a lot of very distinct challenges. It is also one of the sectors that is, I don't know, it has the unique charm of being like very old and having a lot of best practices that don't like to be interrupted. So it's very ripe for innovation, but notoriously hard to sell into. So these are our very brave entrepreneurs. So I want to talk about Amira and Chelsea. So Amira has a company called Math Junior. She recognized that, first of all, math education in the US is way behind the global standard. Other countries are wildly outperforming us in math. And students from diverse backgrounds, students who are racially diverse, from socioeconomically disadvantaged school districts, students who are homeschooled have a tendency to fall behind in math even further. She thought, how can I help close this gap? So she created a suite of math education tools based around the abacus. So she basically recreated the abacus for kids ages around 3 to 6 and created a bunch of workbooks and online tools for math learning that go with it. And all of the images of like the kids and the characters and stuff are culturally diverse, right? So kids who are learning math connect to these characters through storytelling and like emotionally engaging, culturally appropriate things to help them better engage with mathematical skill learning. Very cool. She's super nerdy and awesome, and I love her. So our other venture that went through the Elevate Equity program in the spring is the STEM Lab. So Chelsea, the founder, was a STEM educator with Cincinnati Public Schools. She was a science teacher, and she recognized that no matter how important STEM education is, according to like leading education groups, there are some schools that just don't have the resources or the time in their schedule because of Common Core requirements or the funding or the lab space to provide that hands-on STEM education, right? So you saw that when kids are doing experiments and have the freedom to learn hands-on, they understand STEM concepts a lot better, but sometimes the schools just can't provide that. So she bought a space and started creating a whole suite of programs, camps, after-school programs, birthday parties, different things like that. She'll go to the school and bring like a mobile lab. She actually pivoted entirely to online last year and hand-packed a bunch of like STEM class kits, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. This is like the life of a solo founder, right? And took her whole program online. So she basically saw that, you know, STEM education is important. The schools don't have the resources to provide it. So she says, okay, I'll build the lab. For a fee, your students can come here and do it. Birthday parties, camps, other things, you know, are paid for by, you know, parents or group organizers or Girl Scouts or whatever. But again, instead of relying on charity dollars, she's taking fees for that and generating revenue so that she can continue to grow, right? Her vision, it started out as Cincy STEM Lab, but she changed her name to just the STEM Lab because she said, my vision is to go bigger than Cincinnati, right? I want the Louisville STEM Lab, and I want the Lexington STEM Lab, and I want the Indianapolis STEM Lab, and all that. So there's those. I want to spend some time answering whatever questions you have, but just wanted to sort of bring us all back real quick back to our sort of overarching topic of entrepreneurship for social good, right? I think your age cohort is really unique and awesome in that you see social purpose and social impact as something that cannot be removed from like new ventures or from business or from entrepreneurship. You guys are demanding that companies be accountable for their social purpose initiatives. You guys are demanding that companies be transparent about their impact on the environment, stuff like that. So with all that in mind, I want to reiterate that you will always make more impact if you fall in love with a problem, not a solution, right? If you become passionate about solving some specific challenge in your community or in the world or among your, you know, age group or whatever, the solution will follow, right? You'll come up with the idea if you stay obsessed with solving a problem. You guys are super creative, right? You guys saw in all these examples, like there's always an indirect way to get to where you're going, right? There's always someone else who will, you know, pay for you to deliver your solution in a unique way, or some way you can construct a business model that's never been done before. So never stick to the first right answer. Always be willing to, you know, innovate and change the game. And just because somebody in a certain industry like education or workforce development or whatever says that's not how it's done, doesn't mean that it can't be done that way. Don't go it alone. This is like my number one advice for founders, no matter how old they are, no matter how early or late stage they are. Like, don't be a solo founder. You will overwhelmingly have a better experience, make more impact, and like just go way less crazy if you have a team behind you. You can't do everything, much as I'm sure you wish you could. I wish I could. Like, we've had a lot of questions in some of the Monday sessions about, you know, what if I don't have a person on my team who does this? What if I don't have a person on my team who knows this? Go find someone. Go find someone who's just as crazy passionate about this thing as you are and bring them in. The right people will work with you. And if you guys are interested in any of this stuff, whether it's entrepreneurship or social impact, or just, you know, founding a startup in general, business modeling, nonprofit stuff, anything that you've heard about today, please feel free to reach out anytime. Would love to chat with any of you, answer any questions you have, talk about your startup ideas, whatever. So that's all I got. I'd love to answer any questions you guys have, talk about anything that, sparked your interest.
First, I wanted to say a thank you to you, Mrs. Dalton and Mr. Tucker, for your inspiring words today. I was wondering, could you describe like the psychological side of a consumer when they're like buying from a socially or like eco-friendly business?
I want Josie to answer majority of this. One of the things that, a few years ago, probably 5 years ago, and thank you very much for turning on your camera and asking the question at the same time. T-shirt. One of the things I used to say a number of years ago was that when it came to a buying decision, that consumers would put price and performance ahead of social impact. That was the case. So they would, if they had two products that were equal and one of them had, two products were equal in performance, but one was a lower price and the higher price one had more social impact, it had a social benefit, they would still go for the lower price, or they might do it based on product performance. I think that's changed. And I think it largely has to do with your generation that is more committed to holding, as Josie said earlier, companies accountable. And so people, I think, are more likely to gravitate toward a brand that reinforces that social impact is a major reason for purchasing.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a great contributor in one of our programs. Her name is Rebecca Arbona, and she's like a branding and marketing wizard. And one of the main things that she teaches is that customers make decisions based on their emotions, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. That 5% of your thinking is intentional and logical, and about 95% of your thinking is fast, emotional, and instinctive. So a lot of times it's about how a product makes you feel rather than its actual impact, which is why things like, Toms or compostable food packaging that can't actually be composted or, things like that are so popular because they make people feel good. Outwardly, they look impactful, but they might not actually be, which is why we always encourage, look downstream at what can be measured. But yeah, I'd say it's mostly about feeling. And unfortunately, they will never sacrifice social impact.
And I would say that, that emotional piece of things will cause people to buy a shirt because they see some celebrity wearing it. Mm-hmm. So that is still a factor. But I see this increasing trend to think about the social impact and how that brand reinforces social impact.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like the younger generations, like Gen Z, all of them are really focused on that social side of things. Well, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Emily, go ahead with the question.
I was just gonna kind of ask, like, on the sustainability sort of like topic, like if you guys have like seen like a sort of rise in like compostable tags with like seeds inside of them that people could plant and grow like a plant out of it, like if that was a thing or not.
I've seen that before. I haven't seen it from any like large retailers. Like they're definitely not doing that at like H&M or whatever, but I've definitely seen it from some like boutique-y cool companies.
That's a great example of how, innovation can have social impact, and that there is a marketplace for that, and that people are willing to pay something, maybe the same price, maybe a higher price, or maybe share it more with their friends when they see something that drives impact. Mm-hmm. But that's a great example.
Yeah. Sometimes it's as simple as thinking about, right? You think about something like a shirt, right? A shirt that you buy from the store that has a tag on it. And you think about the whole customer process of like, I need a shirt. I'm going to find a brand that sells the types of shirts I like. Where is that store that I can go get it? I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to purchase it. I'm going to take it home, take the tag off, and wear it. Somewhere in each step of that process is like a potential innovation in sustainability, right? And it's a matter of finding the opportunity that is the one that you want to capture. Or, anything else, not necessarily just sustainability.
Maya, I think, has a question.
Okay, so as we were talking, I just had an idea of a problem such as making um educational apps such as Khan Academy that they don't help teach, but they basically enhance a lesson if you don't get it at school. So I was thinking of how can we make apps like that more accessible to students who cannot hear, who cannot see, and students who cannot.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
so would you censor a company around solving that social issue, or would you implement it to a company? Is my question.
Yeah, and
It's a
this
really
is
good
not
question.
directly answering your question, but it gives you kind of an approach to that, and that is that there's an organization in town called the Cincinnati Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And for them, they have a business venture inside of this where they sell office supplies. And they physically get the supplies and they use the same warehouses that Staples and others like that use. Here's what their social impact is. The people who accept the orders are visually impaired. And so
Mhm.
they create accessible devices to allow them to do that. So they put them in a work environment that allows them to have social impact through their employment and support the overall mission of the organization. So yes, in fact, you know what I would do? I would start doing some Google searches around that and just keywords, accessibility for educational accessibility. And I bet you can find a business that's already approaching that. That's a great question.
But on the flip side, it's a very typical startup journey to go through what's called an exit, right? A lot of startups are built on the assumption that eventually they will either go public and be like put on the stock market or be bought by a larger company, right? Like how I don't know. I was just trying to think of an example. Gillette got bought by P&G, but they don't care about that example. Like, I don't know.
Well, and the idea
Waze getting bought by Google Maps, like
and
that
that's how
kind of
the
thing.
investors make money.
Right. So you invest in a company, it grows, it grows, it grows, it gets bought, and then when the company gets bought and there's that big payout, that's how the investors make their money. So it's very common for, let's say you saw this thing through and came up with a great accessibility solution for online learning modules, right? You were like, I can help hearing impaired students, better understand audio feedback from blah, 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 blah. Khan Academy might buy that from you. And that's an exit, right? And then you can go start something else. So a lot of serial entrepreneurs will build tech products, sell them off, and do something else, right? That's usually considered a success. So.
If you don't mind, I actually wanted to add something to that. Since we were talking a lot about like sustainability and like clothes, trying to make it more sustainable to the environment and like all of that, I feel like sometimes their prices may be raised because of that. And like we were talking about, some people are like older generations that are less willing to kind of put up that extra few dollars to make up for the change. I feel like this could be kind of like a B2B idea, but I feel like changing like the idea of clothes in general. I feel like, like Dillard's, for example, it's such a big store. You have to run air conditioning, heating, extra cleaning. And I feel like you have so much inventory. Like you could rather just have one shirt that's maybe built a little bit more expensive, but you could charge less for it by only having like one medium, small, and large. And then everyone could just try it on there and then order it online. Therefore, you could have a smaller store, if that makes sense.
Yes, I love where your head's at. I think between sustainability becoming a popular issue and everything that has happened with the pandemic, I think the future of retail shopping in person is going to look very different. And I'm excited to see what kinds of creative experiential
Yeah.
things happen.
And very much, if you think about Warby Parker, that's very much their model. Whether they give you the glasses to try on at home, or whether you come to the store in Vine Street, but you don't see the glasses manufactured; they ship them to you.
Right.
I know we're coming up on time, so
yes.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I feel like a lot of stores are starting to transition to online shopping because that's kind of what's like the trend now. But I feel like, you see something that looks really nice, you're like, oh, that definitely fits me. But trying it on at the store makes that difference. So I feel like if companies can maybe just introduce that idea of just keeping less inventory, but you still have that like heart to heart connection of like being able to try it on in person, that would change a lot.
Future of retail. That's one of Centrifuge's opportunity catalysts or whatever they call them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Abby,
Thank
do you
you
want to
guys
go?
so much for having us. This was really fun. Thank you for your participation. You guys were great.
Mhm.
We
Yeah,
love
so
sponsors.
thank you so much, Josie and Bill. This was one of our most interactive sessions to date, and it's so exciting to see students get excited about ideas and pitch competition in the pitch competition. Really, I know I myself, having been a student in the past, have kind of explored these ideas with social entrepreneurship, but I definitely learned a lot during the session and can't wait to see what everyone does with this information moving forward. If you were one of those people that participated and would like a shirt, please email Zand, which is ZAND at centrifuge.com, and provide her with your t-shirt information, as well as if you can pick it up at Union Hall and Over the Rhine or not. If not, we'll figure it out otherwise. But if you would like a shirt, please email Zan. She would appreciate it. And we'll get that all settled for you. As we close out for the day, just a final vocal reminder, please, please, please fill out that survey. I've spammed it in the chat and so did Zand. Really appreciate feedback. And then thank you so much to our sponsors, P&G, Kroger, First Financial Bank, Taft, and KMK. Once again, couldn't do it without them. But thank you all so much for hanging out with us this week. And we look forward to seeing you on Monday for the pitch competition training, and then also for some of our sessions next week. So thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, Bill and Josie. Great
Love
job.
sponsors.